everyone, welcome to Emma, a true infidelity story. I'm excited to share a new story with you. As I stood in my dark room, the red glow of the safe light casting long shadows across the walls, I felt the familiar thrill of anticipation. Each photograph I developed was like a story unfolding, a moment captured forever. My name is Isabella, and I've always believed that life's most profound truths are hidden in plain sight, waiting to be discovered through the lens of a camera. In our quaint suburban home, nestled among the whispering pines, I lived with my husband Arthur, a man whose mind was as sharp as the code he wrote, and our Siberian husky Cooper, whose playful energy was a constant reminder of the joy in life's simple moments. Our days were filled with the mundane yet comforting routines: coffee in the morning, walks with Cooper, and evenings spent discussing everything from the latest tech trends to the intricacies of light and shadow in my photographs. But there was something else, something lurking beneath the surface of our seemingly idyllic life. It was like a shadow in my photographs, always there, just out of focus, waiting to be brought into the light. One evening, as the golden hour painted our backyard in hues of amber and rose, I was setting up my camera to capture the beauty of the moment. Arthur was tinkering with his latest gadget, his fingers deftly navigating the circuits while Cooper chased after squirrel, his barks echoing through the tranquility. That's when I noticed it, a flicker on Arthur's phone's screen, a message that didn't quite fit into our usual banter. It was from someone named. The message was innocuous enough, but there was something in the tone, something that didn't belong in our world of shared secrets and open communication. I didn't confront him then. Instead, I let the moment pass the camera, capturing the scene. But my mind was elsewhere, already developing the negative of doubt. Over the next few days, I found myself watching him, not with the loving gaze of a wife, but with the scrutinizing eye of a photographer looking for the truth in the shadows. The more I observed, the more I saw late-night texts, secretive phone calls, and a change in his demeanor when he thought I wasn't looking. It was like watching a film where the plot twist was just around the corner, but I was the only one who hadn't seen it coming. One rainy afternoon, while Arthur was at work, I found myself in his study, the room where he spent countless hours coding. My heart was pounding, not with the thrill of discovery, but with the dread of what I might find. There, hidden in plain sight, was a small, unassuming notebook. It wasn't his usual tech journal. This one was different, filled with notes, dates, and names I didn't recognize. As I flipped through the pages, the reality of our life together began to blur. Each entry was a piece of a puzzle. I had known existed names, places, and cryptic messages that hinted at a life parallel to ours. One where I was not the protagonist, but merely a supporting character. The storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest brewing within me. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a precipice, the ground beneath me, crumbling as I tried to piece together the fragments of our life. I didn't know it then, but that moment, that simple act of curiosity, would set in motion a series of events that would challenge the very foundation of who I thought I was, and what I believed about my marriage. The lens through which I viewed my life was about to shift, revealing truths that were both terrifying and liberating in the silence of that room. With the rain tapping against the window like a metronome to my racing thoughts, I realized that sometimes the most profound revelations come not from the images we capture, but from the ones we uncover when we dare to look beyond the frame. The day started like any other. Arthur had left early for a tech conference, leaving me to my usual routine of coffee, emails, and planning my next photos. Shootout. Cooper, as always, was my shadow, following me around the house. With his tail wagging, I decided to take him for a walk in our private fenced backyard, a place where I often found inspiration for my photography. The sun was warm, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers. It was during this peaceful moment that my life took an unexpected turn. As Cooper and I walked, I couldn't shake the image of that notebook from my mind. The pages, filled with names, dates, and cryptic messages, seemed to haunt me. Each step I took, echoing the questions that now swirled in my head. The beauty of the morning, the chirping birds, and the gentle breeze did little to calm the storm inside me. I paused by the old oak tree where Arthur and I had carved our initials years ago, a symbol of our love and commitment. Now, it felt like a relic from a different life, one where trust was as abundant as the leaves. On this tree, Cooper sat beside me, his head tilted as if he sensed my uses. I pulled out my camera, focusing on the play of light through the leaves, trying to lose myself in a moment. But my thoughts kept drifting back to Arthur. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I truly knew about his work, his conferences, his late-night coding sessions. Was it all a facade? My heart felt heavy as I remembered the secret of phone calls, the late-night texts, and now the notebook. I needed to know more. I needed to understand what was happening in the shadows of our life. Together with Cooper at my side, I walked back to the house, my mind racing. I decided to delve deeper into Arthur's study to look for more clues, anything that might explain the cryptic entries in that notebook. The study was a sanctuary filled with gadgets, books on programming, and now a notebook that seemed to hold secrets. Once inside, I felt the weight of my actions. This was an invasion of privacy, but the doubt was too overwhelming. I sat at his desk, the chair still warm from where he might have sat just hours ago. The room smelled faintly of his cologne, a scent that once brought comfort, now felt like a reminder of what might be slipping away. I opened the drawer where I had found the notebook. But this time I noticed something else, a small locked box. My pulse quickened. This was new. I hadn't seen this before. The key was nowhere in sight, but my curiosity was insatiable. I searched through his desk, feeling like an intruder in my own home. Underneath a stack of papers, I found an old key, tarnished and forgotten. With trembling hands, I unlocked the box. Inside was a collection of items that seemed out of place. A plane ticket to a city I'd never heard him mention, a photograph of a woman I didn't recognize, and a small velvet pouch containing a ring not mine, but one that looked like it could be an engagement ring. The room seemed to close, and around me each item was a piece of a puzzle I was desperate to solve. The woman in the photo was beautiful, her smile genuine, and there was something in her eyes that spoke of a connection. Perhaps with Arthur. The plane ticket was dated for a week ago, when he had told me he was at a conference. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: betrayal, confusion, anger, and a deep, aching sadness. I placed everything back as I found it, locking the box and returning the key. I needed time to process, to understand what this all meant. I left the study, my steps heavy, my heart heavier. Cooper followed me, his presence a small comfort in the chaos of my thoughts. I went to my darkroom, seeking solace in the familiar red glow, hoping to find clarity in the development of my latest photos. As I worked, my hands moved mechanically, but my mind was elsewhere, piecing together the fragments of our life. The truth was out there, hidden in plain sight, just like the images I developed. But this time it wasn't about capturing beauty. It was about uncovering a reality I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The day that started like any other had now become a pivotal moment, a turning point where the life I knew was about to be irrevocably altered. And as I stood there in the quiet of my darkroom, I knew that the next steps I took would either lead me to a painful revelation, or a path of understanding, and perhaps reconciliation. But one thing was clear: I couldn't remain in the dark any longer. As I was setting up my camera to capture the beauty of the morning light, Cooper, in his usual playful manner, started to nudge me, laughing. I pushed him away gently, but he persisted, his energy infectious. In a moment of playful wrestling, something shifted. The boundary between play and something more intimate blurred in a haze of confusion and a rush of adrenaline. I found myself engaging in an act with Cooper that was far beyond the pale of normalcy. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I was horrified not just at what had happened, but at the part of me that didn't immediately recoil. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal of everything I stood for, of my marriage, of my love for Arthur. I stood up abruptly, my heart pounding in my C********T. Cooper, sensing the shift in my mood, sat back, his tail no longer wagging. I couldn't look at him. The morning light, once so inviting, now felt like an accusatory glare. I walked away, leaving my camera on the grass, its lens still open, capturing the scene I could no longer bear to witness. Inside, the house felt different, alien. Almost each step I took echoed with the weight of my guilt. I went straight to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. The mirror reflected a face I barely recognized, eyes wide with shock and self-loathing. I turned on the tap, letting the cold water run over my hands, trying to wash away the invisible stains of my actions. My mind raced. How could I have let this happen? What was wrong with me? The questions were relentless, each one more condemning than the last. I thought of Arthur, his smile, his touch, and the life we had built together. The thought of him discovering what I had done was unbearable. I needed to talk to someone, but who? My friends, my family, they would never understand. This was a secret. I would have to carry alone, a dark chapter in the book of my life that could never be read aloud. I left the bathroom, my steps now silent, as if I were trying not to disturb the fragile peace of her home. Cooper was waiting outside the door, his eyes full of concern. I couldn't bring myself to pet him, to even acknowledge the bond we shared. Instead, I went to my darkroom, the one place where I could hide from the world, from myself. In the dim red light, I began to develop the photos from earlier. Each image that appeared in the developing tray was a stark reminder of the morning's events. The play of light through the leaves, the innocence of Cooper's playful pose. It all felt like a cruel mockery. Now I watched as the images came to life, each one a silent witness to my betrayal. The door creaked open and I jumped, expecting Arthur. But it was just Cooper, his nose nudging the door open, seeking comfort or perhaps offering it. I couldn't meet his gaze. Instead, I focused on the chemicals, the trays, the negatives, anything but the reality of what had transpired. Time seemed to stretch endlessly in that room. My thoughts were a tangled mess of guilt, fear, and confusion. I considered confessing to Arthur, but the thought of his reaction, of the potential destruction of our marriage, kept me silent. I decided then to bury this incident deep within me, to lock it away, like the secrets I had uncovered in Arthur's study. But unlike those secrets, this one would not be written down, not be hidden in a box. It would live within me, a silent, festering wound. As the day wore on, I found myself mechanically going through the motions of normalcy. I prepared dinner, set the table, all the while feeling like an imposter in my own life. When Arthur came home, his usual cheerful greeting felt like a knife twisting in my heart. I managed a smile, a kiss, but inside I was crumbling. That night, as we lay in bed, the distance between us felt like a chasm. I turned away from him, feigning sleep, but sleep was the last thing on my mind. My thoughts were a whirlwind of what-ifs and should-haves in the darkness. I made a silent vow. I would be better, do better. I would focus on my photography, on the beauty I could capture, not the ugliness I had created. I would rebuild the trust in my marriage, even if it meant living with this secret, this shame forever. But as I lay there listening to Arthur's steady breathing, I knew that some things once seen could not be unseen. Some lines once crossed could not be uncrossed. And as the night deepened, I realized that the true test was not just in keeping my secret, but in living with myself, with the knowledge of what I was capable of doing, and the person I had become in that fleeting moment of madness. In the days that followed, I was a shell of my former self. Every interaction with Arthur was tainted by guilt. I couldn't look at Cooper without feeling a mix of shame and confusion. I started to avoid both, spending more time in my studio working late into the night. My photography, once my solace, now felt like a mockery of my inner turmoil. I knew I had to confront this, but the thought of confessing to Arthur was paralyzing. One evening, as Arthur was setting up a new project on his laptop, he noticed my distant behavior. "Isabella, is everything okay?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. I hesitated, the words stuck in my throat. I've been feeling off lately. I managed to say, my voice fairly above a whisper. He closed his laptop, giving me his full attention. "Talk to me. Isabella, what's going on?" The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my C********T. "Arthur, I've done something I regret deeply." My eyes couldn't meet his. They were fixed on the floor, tracing the patterns in the wood. "What is it, Isabella?" His tone was gentle, yet there was an edge of worry. I swallowed hard, the confession clawing its way up. "It was with Cooper," I said, my voice breaking. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a moment of confusion, of I don't even know what to call it. Arthur was silent for what felt like an eternity. His face went from concern to confusion to something unreadable. "What do you mean, Isabella?" His voice was now a whisper, as if afraid to hear the answer. It was just a moment, a terrible, awful moment. I stammered, tears now streaming down my face. I've been so ashamed, so guilty. I didn't know how to tell you. He stood up, pacing the room, his hands running through his hair. Isabella II, don't know what to say. This is beyond anything I could have imagined. I know. I sobbed, and I'm so sorry. Arthur, I've been trying to bury it, to move past it. But it's eating me alive. He stopped pacing, looking at me with eyes that seemed to search for the woman he married. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I was scared. I admitted, wiping my tears, scared of losing you, of what you'd think of me. I thought maybe I could just make it go away. Arthur sat back down, his face a mask of pain and confusion. Isabella, this changes everything. I need time to think, to process this. I understand, I said, my voice hollow. I'll give you space. I couldn't keep it from you any longer. The silence that followed was thick, oppressive. Arthur eventually spoke, his voice strained. I love you, Isabella. But this is something I never thought I'd have to deal with. I need to figure out how I feel about this, about us. I nodded, feeling the weight of my confessions settle like a stone in my stomach. I'll be the studio if you need me. I just need to be alone for a while too. As I left, the door closing behind me felt like the closing of a chapter, one filled with light and laughter. Now shadowed by my own actions, the walk to my studio was a blur. My mind replaying the conversation, each word a sharp reminder of what I had done in the solitude of my studio. Surrounded by the tools of my trade, I tried to lose myself in the work, but every image I developed seemed to mock me, reflecting back not just the scenes I captured, but the turmoil within. The red glow of the safe light, once a comforting beacon, now felt like an interrogation lamp, exposing my darkest secret. I sat there among the chemicals and negatives, feeling the isolation of my guilt. The camera, my lifelong companion, now felt like a judge, its lens capturing not just the beauty of the world, but the ugliness I had brought into our lives. Hours passed and the night deepened. I knew Arthur would need time, perhaps more than I could give. The thought of losing him, of our life together, unraveling because of my mistake, was unbearable. Yet I knew I had to face the consequences, to give him the space he needed to decide if our love could withstand the storm. As I worked, my hands moved mechanically, but my mind was elsewhere, piecing together the fragments of our life. The truth was out there, hidden in plain sight, just like the images I developed. But this time it wasn't about capturing beauty. It was about uncovering a reality I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The day that started, like any other, had now become a pivotal moment, a turning point where the life I knew was about to be irrevocably altered. And as I stood there in the quiet of my darkroom, I knew that the next steps I took would either lead me to a painful revelation, or a path of understanding, and perhaps reconciliation. But one thing was clear. I couldn't remain in the dark any longer. The moment of truth came unexpectedly. Arthur, sensing something was deeply wrong, insisted we talk, with my heart pounding. I sat him down, the words heavy on my tongue. Arthur, I've done something terrible. I began, my voice barely above a whisper. As I recounted the incident with Cooper, his face went from confusion to disbelief, then to a pain I had never seen before. The silence that followed was deafening. I need time, was all he said before he left the room, leaving me alone with my guilt and the cute dog, who had unwittingly become the catalyst for our potential downfall. The days that followed were a blur of solitude and introspection. I spent hours in my darkroom, not developing photos, but sitting in the dim red light, trying to understand how I could have let things go so far. Each time I looked at Cooper, I saw not just the playful companion, but a reminder of my darkest moment. Arthur was distant, his usual warmth replaced by a cold, formal politeness. He would leave early for work, come home late, and when he was there he'd retreat to his study, the door always slightly ajar, as if to remind me of the space between us. I knew he was wrestling with his feelings, trying to reconcile the woman he loved with the one who had betrayed him in such an unimaginable way. One evening, as the sky turned a somber shade of gray, I decided I couldn't let this silence continue. I knocked gently on his study door, my heart in my throat. Arthur, can we talk? I asked, my voice trembling. He looked up from his computer, his eyes weary. What is there to say? Isabella, His voice was flat, devoid of the warmth that once filled our conversations. I need to know if there's any way we can move past this. I know what I did was wrong, unforgivable, even, but I love you. Arthur. I want to fix this if there's any chance. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know, Isabella. I've been trying to understand, to forgive. But every time I close my eyes, I see you and it's too much. I nodded, tears welling up. I understand. I've been thinking about what you found in your study about about the ring. Is there something you need to tell me too? Arthur's face hardened. That's different. Isabella. That was before us, a past I thought was buried. But this what you did. It's not just a secret from the past. It's an action that happened in our present, in our home. I know, I whispered, the weight of his words crushing me. But we've always been about honesty, about facing things together. Can we at least try? He stood up, walking over to the window, looking out into the dusk. I need to think. Isabella. I need to figure out if I can live with this. If our love is strong enough to survive this kind of betrayal. The room felt colder, the distance between us palpable. I'll be here waiting. I'll do whatever it takes. Arthur, therapy, counseling, anything. I just want us to be okay again. He turned back to me, his expression softening slightly. I'll think about it, but for now I need space. I'll stay at a hotel tonight. Maybe some time apart will help us both see clear. As he packed a small bag, I felt the ground beneath me give way. This was not just a physical departure. It felt like the beginning of an emotional separation. I watched him leave the door, closing with a finality that echoed through the house alone. I sat in the living room, the silence overwhelming. Cooper came to sit beside me, his head resting on my lap, his eyes full of concern. I stroked to spur feeling. The tears come freely. Now what have I done to us? Cooper, I whispered, the cute dog's presence, a small comfort in the vast emptiness of our home. The next days were a test of endurance. I threw myself into my photography, seeking solace in the one thing that had always been my escape. Each photo I developed was a piece of my soul, a silent conversation with the world, and now a desperate attempt to find beauty in the chaos of my life. Arthur did not return that night nor the next. Each morning I woke up to an empty side of the bed, the cold sheets a stark reminder of our fractured relationship. I tried to keep busy to not let the loneliness consume me, but it was there, always lurking like a shadow in my photographs. I received a text from him one evening, simple, and to the point. I'm staying at the hotel for a few more days. I need to think. I replied with a simple, take all the time you need. The days stretched into a week, and with each passing day my hope dwindled. I started to accept that maybe, just maybe, our marriage might not survive this. But I also knew that I had to keep trying for myself, for us, for the life we had built together. In my solitude, I began to write, not just about my photography, but about us, about what happened, about the love that once felt unbreakable. Writing became my therapy, a way to process my guilt, my fear, and my longing for reconciliation. One late afternoon, as I was developing a new set of photos, the door to my dark room opened. I turned, expecting to see Cooper, but it was Arthur. His face was unreadable, his eyes searching mine. I've been thinking, he started, his voice hoarse from lack of use. I've been trying to understand, to forgive, but it's hard, Brooke, so hard, I know. I said, my voice breaking. I'm not asking for forgiveness right away. I'm asking for a chance to show you that I can be better, that we can be better. He stepped closer, the red light casting shadows across his face. I want to believe that. Isabella. I really do. But I need to know if you're willing to work on this, if you're willing to face what happened head on. I am. I assured him, my resolve firm. I'll do whatever it takes. He nodded, a small tentative smile breaking through. Then let's start with counseling together. We need help to navigate this, to find our way back to each other. Relief washed over me, a small light in the darkness. Yes, let's do that. I'll call tomorrow. As he left the room, I felt a glimmer of hope. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with pain, and the hard work of rebuilding trust. But for the first time in days I felt like, maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. The journey would be long and the outcome unclear, but the decision to try was ours. And in that moment it felt like enough. The days turned into weeks, and the silence in our home grew heavier. Arthur had moved out to stay with his brother, leaving behind a void that seemed to echo with every step. I took our once vibrant home, now felt like a mausoleum, each room a silent testament to what we had lost. I sought therapy, desperate to understand my actions, to find some semblance of peace within the chaos of my mind. The sessions were grueling, peeling back layers of guilt and confusion. My therapist, a kind woman with eyes that seemed to see right through me, helped me navigate the labyrinth of my emotions. "You must forgive yourself, Isabella," she'd say, her voice gentle but firm. "Forgiveness is the first step towards healing." Cooper, our Siberian husky, was rehomed with a friend. It was a decision that broke my heart, but I knew it was necessary for my healing process. Every time I looked at him, I saw not just the playful companion, but the catalyst of my darkest moment. The friend, understanding the gravity of the situation, promised to give Cooper the love and care he deserved away from the shadows of our past. Arthur and I started attending couples therapy, a slow and painful process. Each session was like walking through a minefield where every step could trigger an explosion of emotions. We sat across from each other, the physical distance mirroring the emotional chasm between us. The therapist, a seasoned mediator of marital discord, guided us through exercises meant to rebuild trust, but the foundation was severely cracked. One evening, during a particularly intense session, Arthur looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness and resolve. "I want to forgive you, Isabella," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I need to know if you can forgive yourself." His words struck a chord deep within me. I had been so focused on seeking his forgiveness that I hadn't fully confronted my own self-loathing. The realization was like a cold splash of water, shocking yet necessary. "I'm trying, Arthur," I replied, my voice trembling. "I'm trying to find a way to live with myself, to accept what happened, without letting it define me." The journey ahead was uncertain, but in that moment I realized that forgiveness, both his and mine, was the only path forward. Whether our marriage would survive was still unknown, but the possibility of redemption was there, a faint light at the end of a very dark tunnel. As we left the therapist's office, the air felt different, charged with a tentative hope. We walked to our cars in silence, the weight of our conversation hanging between us. Before getting into his car, Arthur turned to me. "I'll see you next week," he said, his tone suggesting more than just another therapy session. I nodded, watching him drive away, his tail lights fading into the night alone in the parking lot. I felt the solitude of my situation, but also a resolve to keep moving forward. Back at home, the emptiness was palpable. I wandered through the rooms, touching the furniture, the photos on the walls, each a memory of a life that felt both distant and immediate. I sat in the living room where Arthur and I had spent countless evenings talking, laughing, and planning our future. Now it was just me, with the ghost of our past life whispering through the silence. I picked up my camera, the one constant in my life, and began to photograph the emptiness. Each click of the shutter was a step towards capturing not just the physical space, but the emotional landscape I was navigating. The photos were stark, filled with shadows and light, much like my current state of mind. Days turned into weeks, and with each session Arthur and I peeled back more layers of our pain. We talked about trust, about the secrets he had kept, and the ones I had inadvertently created. It was during one of these sessions that Arthur shared more about Elle, the woman whose presence in his life had been a shadow over ours. "She was someone from before us," he explained, his voice heavy with regret. "A past I thought was buried, but I realize now I never truly dealt with it." His confession didn't erase the hurt, but it added context to his secretive behavior. We were both flawed, carrying baggage from our pasts into our present. Therapy became our battleground and our sanctuary. We learned to communicate in ways we never had before, to listen, not just to respond but to understand. The process was slow, like developing film in a dark room, each image slowly coming into focus. One evening, as the autumn leaves began to fall, painting our backyard in hues of gold and crimson, I received a text from Arthur. "Can we meet at the park? I want to talk, just us." I agreed, feeling a mix of apprehension and hope. The park was where we had our first date, a place filled with memories of beginnings. As I walked towards the bench where we used to sit, I saw him there, his figure outlined against the setting sun. He stood as I approached, a small, hesitant smile on his face. "I've been thinking a lot." He started, his voice soft, about us, about what we've been through. "I'm not saying it's easy, Isabella, but I want to try. I want to see if we can rebuild, if we can find our way back to each other." Tears welled up in my eyes, not just from relief, but from the realization of how much we both wanted this to work. "I want that too, Arthur," I said, my voice breaking more than anything. We sat together, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the sky canvas of our shared history. The conversation flowed, not forced but natural, as if we were rediscovering each other. "I've missed this," he admitted, his hand finding mine. "Missed us, me too," I whispered, squeezing his hand. The path ahead was still uncertain, fraught with the need for continued effort, understanding, and forgiveness. But in that moment, under the canopy of autumn leaves, we chose to walk it together, step by step, towards a future that was ours to shape. Whether Isabella and Arthur would find their way back to each other completely, or if the damage was too great, remained an open question. But what was clear was their commitment to try to face the darkness together, and perhaps to find light in the shadows of their past. That if this story resonated with you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us craft more engaging stories for you.